Gisteren heeft de ambassadeur van Amerika in Suriname, Robert Voucher, 2 originele prenten van Maria Sibylla Marian overhandigd aan Museum Bakkie. Wij brengen u de toespraak van de ambassadeur, Robert Voucher.
It's really a special pleasure and a special day for us. This came about almost by mistake, and we had heard about a woman in the United States who wanted to make a donation to this museum. And you're saying, well, why are we doing this here at the American Embassy? The reason was that I offered to actually hand carry these 2 wonderful prints from Washington to here, because I happened to be in the States at the time, and I agreed I could bring them for the museum. And so based on that, we could put everything together, and we are doing the official handoff today. But I think it's important to understand that this, action, what we're seeing, especially by the donor in Washington, is kind of a part of an American tradition. I don't know if many of you have been to Washington, or all of you have been there, but the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. is the world's largest museum. It has an education and research complex that is unparalleled around the world. And it is the crown jewel, many would say, of American culture. It is the home of about 157 million artifacts and includes the most frequented museum in the world, the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., as well as museums for the African American History and Culture, the American Art Museum, the American History Museum, the National Zoo, and my favorite, the National Postal Museum. And the Smithsonian was all made possible because of a donation by a Mr. James Smithson, who in 1846 bequeathed his estate to establish the Smithsonian Institution for the purposes of increasing and diffusing knowledge. So it was a private donation that created the institution of the Smithsonian. And with this incredible and generous endowment, James Smithson also reinforced the tradition that we had in the United States of private philanthropic support for museums and cultural institutions. Now, this tradition of private philanthropy extends beyond the borders of the United States, and I'm proud today to participate in another wonderful and generous example of U.S. philanthropy. Today, we celebrate the donation of these 2 prints by Maria Sibylla Marian. She's an American donor to the Bakkie Plantation Museum. The donor, her name is Gay Van Pelt, is an amateur wildlife photographer who had studied in the Galapagos Islands while in college. And her heroes at the time, and still are, were among the greatest ecologists of our age, including Jacques Cousteau, Jane Goodall, and David Attenborough. Now, Maria Sibylla Marian's story was inspirational to Gay Van Pelt. Indeed, David Attenborough called Maria Sibylla Marian the founder of the science of ecology, a person to whom we all owe a major debt of gratitude. As I think is well known here in Suriname, Marian traveled to Suriname in 1699 to study and record the tropical insects native to the region, particularly the butterflies and moths here in Suriname. After 3 years in Suriname, she returned to Amsterdam, and in 1705, she published the Metamorphosis Insectorum Surinamensium, I can never say that, of which we have a facsimile in the back of the room of her book. It was a huge accomplishment at the time. It's still a huge accomplishment today for anyone to have done that, but particularly at that time for a woman to have done this and changed the whole way we look at the ecology of the world, the nature of the world. Marian's Metamorphosis was included in its entirety at the Museum of Women and Arts in Washington, D.C., which opened while Gay was working in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s. Gay was apparently completely taken by the book on display and began collecting antique natural history prints shortly thereafter. Knowing that we were going to have this press conference, Gay wrote to me to ask me to pass this message on. She said, "I could not be happier that these prints are going back to the origins of her work, and specifically the Bakkie Museum and plantation. It was exciting when Boss-Beck reached out to me, and he had already done so much research on Marion's process of creating her prints. I do not think things happen for a reason, and these prints are where they are meant to be. They are part of the history of Suriname. That's from Gay. Now, as I have said many times, I believe the United States and Suriname share a history that goes back over 400 years, and I am proud that today I could play a small part in our shared history by personally hand-carrying these prints from the United States to Suriname and presenting them to the Bakkie Plantation Museum. They are indeed back home. And I have to believe that Maria Sabia Marian and James Smithson would be both happy and proud to see what we're doing here today.